I too have been a senior records manager at Regional Health Command Atlantic with 50 records professionals reporting to me across Regional Health Command's area of responsibility. Um, so to give you an idea, some of my background, I'm an AIM certified enterprise content management master, and I worked as a data asset manager for Headquarters Air Force at the Pentagon, managing files, records, and image assets. You know, back at the time when 5 terabyte was a large online library, you know, I had to create the naming rules and metadata tags and disposition schedule of a rather unclassified library. Next slide, please. There. So prior to COVID-19, the Army Records Information Management System, or ARIMS, is how Army manages its records. And prior to COVID-19, I helped train records assistants, administrators throughout my region. And my area of responsibility covered all Army medical, dental, veterinary, and public health facilities in all states east of the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean, and from Maine to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's a large area and many different places. We were managing with shared drives and SharePoint as our digital containers for temporary and permanent digital records. And then before leaving, staff had a required appointment with a records manager to find and review records. And this was a necessary procedure for checkout. Procedures were well worn and defined, and the number and places of storage was limited, and access to laptops available within the office. Items could be printed and saved in analog files if you wanted it, and it was the records manager's job to execute the program, and therefore it's seen as that person's main responsibility. Staff were not so concerned with the files they made, other than appending final to the title of a document. Folks knew which records held the latest version of orders and briefs and records. Then came telework, networks, and silos. Oh my! In the early days of COVID-19 pandemic, all staff teleworked. Army Medicine used a virtual private network, or VPN, to connect to computers and to servers, and the user to their email and their office accounts. The VPN was often overloaded, and staff could not sign in to their email or their office files. The bandwidth for Defense Connect's teleconferencing services was also overloaded. When staff were denied access to VPN servers, they created and recreated documents on their laptops and saved them on their C drive. Then the DoD quickly rolled out collaboration and teleconferencing tools such as Microsoft Teams CVR. Across the enterprise, new tools sprang up. Staff received invitations to join in Zoom, Skype, WebEx, Connect, and Teams meeting. People were collaborating across silos and traditional boundaries. Virtual town halls held meetings on Facebook and Twitter. Some staff never visited or knew about their command's Twitter or Facebook accounts until COVID-19. Social and cloud platforms such as MillSuite, Interlink, and APAN saw much more traffic. All of these locations allowed staff to post and share digital files. Even within a single Teams environment, there are multiple places to upload digital documents, such as the Teams General folder, the Files section, the chat and wiki and discussion board were all locations within one cloud platform to share a digital document many, many times. Because of the fear of being denied VPN access was high, staff placed documents everywhere. When they forgot where they placed it last, they posted it again in the current collaboration stream. There was uncertainty day to day on which system you had access and when the bandwidth would max out and your access being denied. Having multiple copies everywhere you created access assurance. They could get to and share a document on any given day from many different platforms. Email attachments blossomed. In order to print out a document, people had to email it to their personal home email accounts, then open it, print it, sign it at home, and then send it back. This created infobesity. Document collaboration on different sharing platforms created digital exhaust. Most of it was unmanaged. Many didn't know how to manage many of the platforms that well. The mandate to use the new programs did not come with advanced warning or training. Soon, remembering where the digital files were posted became a problem. Others had issues with remote SharePoint permissions and getting signed analog documents scanned to a digital record and posted on SharePoint became a problematic exercise. Awareness of document and records management became a talking point amongst leadership. So, records management for everyone. Users were getting lost in a cloud of digital exhaust, wondering which one document was the last one edited, which document was a copy, which document was the official record to keep. Remote isolation affected the ways of working, and collaboration changed. Software changed. People were getting change fatigue, and I needed behavior to change. I needed workers to value their content before it was buried under a pile of completed tasks and answered email. I began sharing tips and tricks. Make your documents smarter. Use best practices on social media and in collaborative meeting. Adapt known practices to suit your remote environment. Fortunately, Defense Information Systems Agency expanded bandwidth for services. DoD added live and pre-recorded Teams training. People gained experience working in isolated remote environments. The trained records manager was not a walk down the hall or a few cubicles away. I was helping people develop good digital practices which help them find and manage their own files and records. There were a myriad of tools staff had, but rarely used. I highlighted those tools. I reminded them it was something they already had. I let them know they did not have to be smarter. They just had to make their documents smarter. Digital records are helpful when infused with metadata. As the creator of a document, they already knew about its contents and purpose. They can choose key terms to help jog their memories. I reinforced this was not new information, and Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint were tools they already used. It was not scary, it was not new, and they could do this. It was a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. So we had to take a pause and learn. I held weekly training sessions for key users, then bi-monthly tips and tricks for SharePoint site owners and division chiefs. People were willing to ask questions as we were in unprecedented times. It was easy to say, I don't know how. I reinforced we were all learning something new and working under COVID-19 protocols. Records management was just another item. I allowed goofs and gaffes saying, hey, creating a safe learning environment was essential. Some feel making errors with records could end a career. They hear about legal holds and email holds. I wanted to make digital records less frightening. This made adoption easier. We used templates made by others. When my supervisor searched for his documents in SharePoint, he could not find them. He was not listed as the author. The template maker was listed as the author. I held my supervisor accountable for tagging his documents by checking to see if they were tagged with his name as author. He updated his way of working. Having digital documents with proper metadata made documents findable across all platforms. I advised members using Teams and other collaborative tools that after collaboration and editing were complete, move it to the command SharePoint. SharePoint is Medcom's container for records and documents. And if you want them managed and maintained, that is where we decided to put them. As for the collaborative tools, we were not certain if they would stay past September 30th, 2020. If they do stay, which ones? Collaborate, develop, and share them, then move them to a managed container became the new way of working. This reduced redundancies of many digital files. Our enterprise environment stabilized, bandwidth increased, remote working experience increased, and the fear of access denial began to subside. So now we had the how in how to. So I used a sample Microsoft Word document to show how to get to the document properties. This was the document. You go to the file, you go to the properties, and this is where you start adding those items in the document properties panel. This is where you can add tags, titles, authors, comments, categories, and more. This is all metadata about the document, making it smarter, and it stays with the individual document. The more information added here, the greater the chance you have of retrieving it, and the greater the chance this document comes forward when you're searching for like documents on a particular topic. You can lock the document if you like. You then have to send the unlocking code to the receiver. I went over file naming rules, and most digital documents have a digital container, ours at SharePoint, and our file naming rule is letters, numbers, hyphens, and underscores, no blank spaces, and no special characters. Document titles had to be descriptive of the content. The title stuff would not do. We did not have a key terms registry. For me, the first step was getting folks to use the properties panel and adding this metadata. To get them used to creating their own metadata, I believe as folks use the property panel, the easier it is to take them the next step with rigorous metadata and creating a registered key. You can begin by cataloging the most commonly used tags, and that would be the start of developing a folksonomy. Once self-tagging is common, you can build a taxonomy from this point. For many, folks starting from scratch, this is an organization's first step. I remind them documents can train artificial intelligence softwares as well. The metadata you put on your digital files are valuable beyond your own use. Recognizing digital documents are available for everyone's viewership, and that this digital document belongs to the organization as a corporate asset helped tame infobesity. So we got them to use and train them in how to do this and where to look and where the authors were, and adding what kind of key tags to be added, even if it was just items to remind the user what the document was about and help them find it. So the how and how to began to be standardized. The next was for those resistance. So why and why should I? During COVID-19, the focus of digital records and access raised awareness among leaders and users alike. Leadership and casual users understood how sharing, finding, and staging digital records helped them in their jobs. Talk of document versioning, tagging, and authorship no longer puzzled the general user and people itself. The need for smart digital records affected everyone up and down the chain of command. Communication strategy formed to get the word out to all document creators, users, and consumers. Mandating those records management collided with COVID-19 stay-at-home orders. Staff could not put off this effort. They themselves had to do it. Workers were remote, and now was the time to push onward. Documents, mission, and communication had to move forward. Communication requirements increased because of COVID-19. Unused and little used channels of communication were now the main remote channels. The usual arguments of not having enough time fell away, as it was an urgent task for managing day-to-day workloads. The experience barrier to digital records fell by COVID-19 omnipresence and pressures. Everyone, not just the expert or the experienced, had to manage their own digital records, and everyone was on their own and remote. Lack of expertise was not a reason for mismanaging your records or your team's records. Everyone was learning new tools and methods, and records management was another process added to everyone's plate. Even minor steps in tagging and deduplication increased trust in the rest of the document management system. The culture of the organization shifted under this awareness. Behaviors began to change as COVID-19 protocols deepened in week 6. The remote protocols moved the culture forward in new norms and unwritten rules of how digital records worked in the office changed. The inconsistencies in handling digital records highlighted stereotypes of who did what. The struggles of remote operations changed the value of work and records proficiencies and your own value of your records and your documents. Document trust emerged as digital files were distributed, collaborative output of remote leaders and workers were shared. Digital documents circulated as the accurate policy and positions of changing and fast-flowing events. Our organization spreads across time zones. Teleworkers were able to view documents before and after standard work hours. This command's culture changed to value knowledge sharing. Digital documents were the key method of knowledge sharing. With increased findability, documents supported information sharing in remote meetings and across time zones. Then another type of digital document added to the digital workload, that of recorded conference meetings and town halls. These were records of changes of command leadership, announcement of new policies, and disclosures of policies shifts. These are digital records, and knowing how to tag and manage them became another concern. Groups in distant silos now interacted, and organization flattened. Keeping track of decisions and publishing became important as organizations made efforts to stay in step with its remote workers. Increasing a document's findability and use decreased deduplications, rework, and errors, and lack of alignment. In sharing, we had to standardize terms and procedures. This came at a time when COVID-19 introduced new terms for new software packages. Reducing content sprawl was a factor that supported findability and document trust. Removing obsolete documents from our SharePoint container had meaning and real impact. If all the surrounding documents were out of date, how much trust would you have in the document you were downloading? Probably not much. You may even spend time checking to see if it was the current document. Digital documents needed a policy for migrating chats and streaming content from social and collaborative platforms to our SharePoint container. When selecting digital records, tagging begins. Then it's followed by migration. When tagging resistance arises, the added mandates by Congress, such as current M1921, adds fuel to the effort. Mentioning deadlines in the admonition, this is something that should be ongoing, helps. Records inspection dates also helps to add to the effort. However, the resistance to this work has decreased as all people understand why this is important. Never let crises go without maximizing its teaching effects. In the case of COVID-19, it is taught that digital records are more important than ever. Records are the documentarians of events and actions in history. Records become the training material for artificial intelligence and machine learning, two new growing government initiatives. Without proper metadata, recalling records for AI efforts is difficult and time-consuming. The government wishes to be more agile on these initiatives, and our records are training grounds for these efforts. It is your records that make our government agile. And as mentioned earlier by Dave Simmons and others, that putting records and the tagging close to the end user creator and manager and closing these two domains became important. So they saw that it was something as simple as creating a document file name. You now can create tags. The one document that you're currently working on, put those tags in categories so you can help remember them. So it closed these two domains. One of the items when I could bring up about COVID-19 regarded looking for past contracts and talking about how putting contracts in a case file. PPE became a scarce item during COVID-19, and we began looking at previous contracts that were now past use, but we were looking at who else were some of our PPE contract providers. Could we find them and use them and pull them forward and see what kind of contracts we could make amendments to and get those items? So you never know exactly what is going to be used in the future and what could be used and brought forward. But with metadata and use and findability increased, we can now make ourselves smarter and reduce the time to get to a decision. And that's what I kept impressing upon Records Leader. It isn't just records for records management. It's about our workflow and getting to decisions faster. And Troy, I'm hoping that I could bring you a little closer to time management now. Are we a bit closer? We can go to questions now.
We even have time for a couple questions. So thank you very much for sort of sharing the story and sharing it succinctly. A couple of the questions that came in were about getting the end users trained up, and you talked a little bit about how you get them to take the time to invest in this and make it easier for them. But one of our audience members asked about a reality check on the training and how often you've had to train and retrain to get users to do the meta tagging and document updating correctly.
I do a weekly training with more of the end users, and I also do a bi-weekly training with super users. And to talk about training, I had to bring training down to the end user's term. I would say to them, author, who's writing this document? Do you know who you are? Do you know your name? Well, yes, of course. Well, that's something simple. Go to the property panel and put in your name. Type it in right there. That's something you know. Do you know how to name a file? Yes, most people, when they open up Word document, it comes with no file name. But if you're writing uh, a briefing on PPE availability and you name that PPE availability, I show them, go to key terms, type in PPE. You know what you're writing about. And so I got them over the fear of, I didn't go to a NARA class. I'm not an ARIMS qualified person, because there was that sense that that was something for the other person. But look at what you're doing. Look at your own document. You know who you are. You know where you can put your name. You know what you're creating. Put those key terms there. And that's how I got them over the fear of, I'm not a trained, compliant person. And once that started, then I would take the next step and say, now let's keep using the same term. And let's use common terms for executive summaries. So let me go to that record. And that's where we started putting those things, different categories. We would say, is this a briefing? Is this an executive summary? These were the common categories that we used in our everyday speaking, and end users got to know that.
Okay.
Next question.
And this sort of builds on that. What sort of training materials have you relied on? Obviously, you've built the terms into the system, but to get good engagement, are you building a video library of training or reference guides, or is it really face-to-face sessions that are the main weapon?
What is nice is that the Army Records Information Management System has online training, and I'm able to send that link, and they can sign up for it and train on their own time. And so that is a helpful item. That's supplemented with weekly tips and tricks and a lot of screenshots. And so that begins to bring the masses into a sense of, I can do this. I understand. And then sending those links for online training is helpful. And then keeping in our SharePoint container, how to do a single item, how to add your name as the author in a document. And each individual task might take 2 to 3 minutes. And when somebody's in an immediate workflow, just knowing the keystrokes, how to do that is helpful. I try to keep it really simple.
And one specific question about the data. An audience member was asking if you've incorporated the ARIMS file numbers into the metadata.
For most of the new users, just getting them to use the properties panels, that's where I'm going with that. And I'm having my records assistants go into those files. They're able to find them, and then they can add them. As I said, I have probably hundreds of locations for the eastern half of the United States. And as a records administrator, perhaps at Womack Army Medical Center, I would say to them, you want all that work on your shoulder? You can appoint as a records manager as many assistants as you need, one for every department, to help share that load. And those people get the upskilled training on how to add those ARIMS numbers, at least in documents for their department that they're familiar with. People that are in budgeting department are much more familiar with those kinds of records, and they can recognize those better. People that work in an HR department, if a records assistant gets appointed there, even as a part-time, they become much more familiar, and they're already working in that section, so they can recognize those and put those numbers in.
Okay. And then you clearly piqued the curiosity of several of the viewers with the training that's available, the online learning. Is there any way for people outside your organization to tap in and take that training?
The Army Records and Information Management training, the general training is for DoD users, so you would have to have a common access card
Okay.
to take it. We do not provide ARIMS training. You may take it, but it may not be the general record schedule that the Fed's Health Agency or other agencies is using. So our system is a little bit different, but it offers a pretty good understory. So for DoD folks, if these items are circulated, I'll provide the link to the Army Records and Information Management System link for training.
Great, and we will circulate the presentation, absolutely. And then the final question for you is something that's come up in the previous sessions, which is about dealing with those legacy paper records. Does your agency still handle any paper records? And if so, how are you handling the conversion, particularly with regard to document integrity and PII privacy concerns?
Yes, we still have paper records. I inherited this position as a knowledge officer because they saw that I was a enterprise content management master and had been a records manager before. And so I inherited from a broken system, meaning in DoD, we often have people leave. And so then a new person came on board. When they left, there was a gap of about 9 months when somebody tagged me and said, "Tag, you're it." And I went down to a space with, what are these boxes in this office for? And so I opened them up and I went, oh my Lord. So there is a method of scanning them, and there is a new method. We're trying to get them in, and we now have a scanner at all of our locations. And then we have to do the back end work, and that is being left to our records managers and our records administrators dealing with that.
Very good. Well, and I think that could probably be a discussion in and of itself, which we will have to save for a subsequent edition of these events. But Cynthia, thank you very much for sharing your agency's story and letting us dig in a little bit.
Thank you.